Alford with the Daily Journal and Tupelo.
Parish, there you go. Thank you.
Could you talk a little more about the SEC new coaches orientation and what goes on there?
Yeah, for 26 years now, every new coach hired into the SEC is invited to spend a day in the SEC office. Opens with that video, a message from me. It has evolved over time. It used to be almost 15-minute increments going through an SEC manual. So I'll start talking about vision and expectations, review some of our challenges in the past, and really talk about the opportunities that they have. We brought in a representative from Twitter to educate our coaches on effective use of social media. We've brought in some consultants, growing leaders from Atlanta to talk about strategies for communication with young people today. You've heard it's not the same as it may have been 10 or 20 years ago, and so we want people to think intentionally about those aspects of their work. We talk through our policies, so somebody may have coached for years and years, decades literally, and we'll walk through what our policies are, how those might vary. People to know. We talk about our television agreements and where they may run into expectations. So our hope is when they begin, they've got at least a level of familiarity and some information they won't hear otherwise. In fact, I know we're the only conference that invests this type of resources in every new coach. What is interesting is I led that effort probably for 13 years. We one time hit 70 in one session. There's a session in May, July, and in October. The first session we had in May, we had over 120 people. This session last week, we had 80, and we have one more to go. So we are setting new records for new people. And it's not just coaches. It may be staff around our sports programs as well who come join us for a day in Birmingham.
All right, we'll stay down front. Ron?
Yeah, Ron Higgins, Noble.com, Thomas McCune. Greg, how exactly is the SEC going to, monitor gambling? And is it something that each school also will do? I mean, how have y'all set that up?
Well, Ron, it's not as if there's a plan. You can subscribe to a service. Part of our education in 2011 is should we subscribe and find out what's happening around gambling. Part of the positive step with legalized gambling is there's a lot more sunshine on what's happening. And one of the lessons is those involved in legalized gambling are the best at knowing what's happened. I think some of the state laws include expectations for communication around transparency. If there are oddities, I think that's one of those elements that we would encourage. I think there are two parts really to the question: monitoring what's happening at a state and national level. From a policy standpoint, that's the communication with other leagues, both at the college and professional level. And then the discussion of should we be in the habit of subscribing to a service that analyzes our games? Is there strange things that might happen around the line? We've not done that yet, but certainly a topic of conversation.
Okay, Greg, we'll go back to our right, about 3/4 of the way back on the aisle.
With the once extreme popularity of the NFL and how it's slid somewhat as of last year, how do you, if so, and how do you prevent the bleeding over into college football and its popularity?
If I understand the question, it was about a commentary about the NFL, and NFL still seems popular. They've obviously had some issues arise. I separate those because I've been clear, I think even here last year, I want to make sure as we think about our game, we think about college football. I think there are likely lessons to be learned about how we manage the game, but our game and its relationships within our states and our alumni and universities is a very different relationship than what exists between fans of the NFL by comparison. I think that we want to make sure those affiliations with our universities are strong. You see increased applications, increased enrollments, increased alumni numbers. Those are all core affiliations. Part of the success expectation, the innovation that I talked about with our media partners, and the attentiveness to allowing our fans to have access, all of that's part of a strategy to make sure we have those type of healthy relationships and the type of connection that keeps us strong and vital in the future.
Okay, we'll go back down front, second row. Tom?
Hey, Greg. Tom Murphy, Arkansas Democrat Gazette. Is there an abridged version of how this event wound up here this year, and what's the SEC stance on future sites of media days? Is it in Hoover next year, and then what's beyond that?
I'll do my best with an abridged version. We thought very intentionally about moving media days here last summer with the Mercedes-Benz Stadium opening and the Falcons were great in conversation, thought, wow, what a neat way to have the first college football event be SEC Media Days in or around Mercedes-Benz Stadium. Obviously, construction made that a possibility that wasn't real for us, and so we had to make a change relatively early on, and not really a change, but remain in Hoover. But it started a set of thoughts and preparations that led us here today. And then, believe it or not, there's a lot of work with changing something you've done in the same place for well over a decade to relocating to a different city and a different facility. But when I stood here for a little bit of practice last night, we've got a goal post at the end. We're playing literally on the turf. You know, there's just a feel around football that I think is special and unique. We are in Hoover next year, and then I've been clear that on my mind is some portability, because I can see already there are fans who likely haven't seen this event or been a part of this event who are here today, and we can do that in different places, just like we had a men's basketball tournament in St. Louis in March of this year.
Okay, we have time for two more. We'll start. Amanda, over here on our left, right here on the.
Dan Wolkin, USA Today. Greg, I know you hear from a lot of people with various agendas about the scheduling, understanding that you are not likely to go to a 9-game schedule anytime soon. I think one of the stakeholders in this that does not usually have their opinion greeted with much appreciation is the fans. And because of your divisional structure in the league, you have fan bases that go 12 years without seeing schools in the other division in those stadiums. What is the benefit of a divisional structure given that, and also the fact that the schedules have become, frankly, quite unbalanced?
Well, there's some opinion in there that we could probably debate for a lot of time. Let me just go back to the core question, which is our attention to our fans' interests. That's actually part of that annual conversation. That is an element. And I think Pat Dooley wrote an article about visiting fans traveling or not traveling. And one of the questions people have asked is it a time to refresh matchups? We haven't arrived at that destination, but I want to be very clear that we're not inattentive to fan conversations. On the other side, we've led the attendance nationally for the last 19 years, and we still sell, I think, in the high 90 percentile of all of our available tickets. So I think the fans also speak in a positive way about what's happening. I don't know that I'll go much further into metrics and discussion. Today I've seen observations that we should be at a 9-game schedule. One of those conversations that we've had with the College Football Playoff Selection Committee chairs is about the conference schedule piece, and I want to try to be intentional. What they've said is we look at the entire schedule. That's the issue that our schools have to be, and our teams have to be mindful of, is the entirety of their schedule needs to be robust. Now, we know from the figures I quoted that the level of play in this league is uniquely robust. Not simply in our opinion, but it's what's been reflected over time. That's a factor in this conversation. I think, go back to my comments, the divisional structure has supported a number of really healthy, really important rivalries or sectional games that have great meaning. And when you start developing different formats, remember I said back in 2014 we worked through a lot, you end up interrupting some things that right now is not a priority for us. We want to maintain those types of scheduling rivalries. Could that change? That's why we have conversations every year. But those rivalries are really healthy and I think really unique, particularly in the number of those that exist in this conference.
Okay, we'll take one final one here on the aisle.
Adam Sparks, the Tennessean in Nashville. Greg, it's assumed that the revenue distribution from the conference, that money will go back into football at each member school, and maybe to a lesser extent other teams in athletics. What's the conference's stance on how that money is used at each school, and what are your thoughts on that distribution going back into the university apart from athletics, if obviously the football program is the one that earned it?
I'm going to kindly disagree with the observation embedded in the question, which is, I think the statement, I may be paraphrasing, that the bulk of the revenue distribution from the conference goes back into football. I could go through anecdotally conversations where that's not accurate, but let's start with what happens at the university level. We don't mandate how that revenue flows once it leaves our office, how it's distributed on campus. We have science buildings, I know, at Arkansas and Kentucky that have been funded through intercollegiate athletics. We have different revenue flows for student scholarships on some of our campuses, and I've had those conversations at Florida, South Carolina, LSU. We have other contributions from our campus, from our athletics programs back to campuses. I don't have those facts and figures in front of me, Adam, but that's factual. It is also very clear that the conference revenue distribution supports the breadth of what we do. I didn't go into all of our achievements this year, but the fact that across 21 sports we're playing at the national championship level on a consistent basis is an indication of the wisdom with how our institutions have used their revenue and resources to support the breadth of programs in their athletics department, and as I said, very clearly what happens on their university campuses as well. And I'll go back from a revenue standpoint and offer that I think part of what's happened around this league, our media agreements, why those are important, the SEC network, is that we have become an incredibly attractive place for students. We have student volunteers that I'll visit with. They're from California, Arizona, Connecticut, Illinois, Ohio. They come from all over the country to be educated on our campuses. A big piece of that is the most significant piece is education, but we present ourselves incredibly well and support ourselves incredibly well through intercollegiate athletics. I'll be around. We've got a schedule to keep, so I'm not running away, but I'll be around. And if you talk to our staff, probably Herb or Catherine, and want to have a conversation, we'll certainly work to make that happen. Thanks for being here. Thanks for finding your way to a new destination, and I hope the next few days are productive for each of you.